Missouri chapter of Physicians for a National Healthcare Program. And he'll be talking to us about the status of the Medicaid expansion in Missouri. And then on June the 8th, Senator Jill Shoup will be our speaker, and she'll be giving us a legislative update on the legislation in the Missouri legislature, and that session will be over on May 14th, so she can fill us in on everything that occurred, hopefully. And we also hope to have a speaker from the National Council of Jewish Women in St. Louis on that night. And we will not be meeting in July and August. We're going to all take a break and hope that there'll be a lot to report at our meeting when we resume in September. And we have great hopes that perhaps in September, we'll be back in person for meeting. And if we meet, that'll be the second Tuesday in September. And our normal meeting place is the Daniel Boone Library in the meeting room, the large meeting room on the lower level. So cross your fingers and hope that that becomes an option. We're not sure yet, but that's our goal. If not September, it'll be October. And so watch for information on that, and also watch our newsletter. We hope to have that continue during the summer. I'm in charge of that. And my goal always is to have it come out on the third Wednesday of the month. So if you are a member of Chesterfield Township Democrats, you will automatically receive that on the third Wednesday of the month. And I hope everyone tonight is a member of Chesterfield Township Dems, but if you are not, you can easily join by going to our website, which is chesterfielddemocrats.org. And if you would prefer not to join online, I'm going to put my address in the chat, and you can send a $25 check to me, and I'll put that in the chat. So just like to say thank you again for being with us, and hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Thank you. I'll give it back to Maureen.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Nancy, thanks.
Everybody that was born in my year was Nancy, Kathy,
Nancy.
or Debbie, so I'm used to it, or Linda.
Okay, so first up, we are going to have Mary Gross, who really is not a stranger to many of us since she is a member and has always faithfully come to meetings. But tonight, she's the local, in case somebody does not know her, she's the local group lead for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And she's been a volunteer with them since 2014. And so with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mary, so you can tell us the good, bad, and ugly with what's going on with guns.
Okay, Maureen, thank you. I just want to let everybody know that Brian tells me that he will make my slides available to you. So I only have 10 minutes and I'm going to talk pretty fast. There are some calls to action on here, and I really, really hope that you will complete those and participate. If you're confused about whether or not you should identify yourself as a Moms Demand Action supporter when you're calling or emailing your legislators, don't. That's my advice. Just don't, because it's too confusing to figure out when you should and when you shouldn't. So I am going to hopefully share my screen here and get started. Can everybody see my screen okay? All right. So as Maureen said, I'm the volunteer co-lead for West St. Louis County Moms Demand Action. And that is my email address, and I'm happy to take any questions. So in case you don't know who we are a grassroots gun violence prevention group. We do support the Second Amendment, and we support responsible gun ownership. We are nonpartisan and evidence-based. We advocate for sensible gun legislation. We are part of Everytown for Gun Safety. They're actually our umbrella organization. We have over 6 million supporters nationwide, and we have active groups in every state. Missouri, we have about 18 active groups. And I want you to remember that 100+ people are shot with a gun and killed every day in the US. 2/3 of those are suicide. And yes, this is a serious subject, but I do have a few cartoons in here because you gotta lighten it up a little bit. I do want to talk about federal background check law just for briefly. So Missouri does not have a background check law, but we do observe the federal background check law. So federal background checks are required if you buy a gun from a federally licensed dealer. So if you go to a Cabela's or you go to your local gun store, they will do a background check on you. background checks are not required of non-licensed sellers. So I call them gun hobbyists. So if you go to an estate sale, you'll find gun hobbyists at gun shows. You might find them online, and it's perfectly legal for them to sell a gun with no background check. So to remedy that, the US House of Representatives has passed the bipartisan H.R. 8, which requires background checks on all gun sales. And by the way, Ann Wagner voted no on that. The other problem with the background check, with the federal background check law, is that a federally licensed dealer has 72 hours to complete the background check. If it's not completed in 72 hours, that dealer can go ahead and proceed with the sale. So to remedy that, we have H.R. 1446, which also passed the House of Representatives on March 11th. So both of these bills, H.R. 8 and H.R. 1446, are headed to the Senate. So H.R. 1446 would extend the time to complete a background check from 3 days to 10 days. And Ann Wagner voted against that as well. So here's our call to action for the background check law. There's 3 different ways that you can do this. I know you'll feel like it's futile to ask Blunt and Holly to vote for the background check law, but I think our voices need to be heard. And if you're being attacked by somebody, are you just going to lie there and not say anything? No, you're going to fight back. So you can open your phone camera right now if you want to and use this QR code. A page will pop up and you just complete it. You can sign this digital petition, or you can text the word checks, I can't say that too fast, to 64433, and then you'll get talking points from every town and be automatically connected by phone to your state senator. And like I said, Brian will make these slides available to you. So if you don't get to it right now, you can do it later. Now, the Missouri legislative season starts in January. It ends on May 14th. And we are always hunting for sensible gun legislation, just like Elmer Fudd is hunting for the rabbit here. So let's talk about Missouri laws. So H.R. 85 and 310 are pretty much the same. They seek to nullify federal gun laws in Missouri. Jared Taylor, who proposed this law, likes to call it the Second Amendment Preservation Act. So I just told you about federal background check law. Would this negate the need for any federal background checks in Missouri? Would criminals, would felons, would domestic violence perpetrators be allowed to purchase a gun without a background check? We do not know the answer to that question. So we believe that this fosters distrust in the rule of law and it creates confusion. Also, if this bill is passed, it really hamstrings local and state law enforcement from assisting federal agents from enforcing or even investigating federal gun laws. So if there's some gun trafficking going on that they want to investigate, our local and state police departments are not allowed to assist federal agents. And if they do, they are fined, the police department is fined no less than $50,000. So people who voted for it, the local representatives are DeGroot, Dottie Bailey, Derek Greyer. Trish Grunby was opposed to it. Shamed Dogan was absent. The call to action on this would be to call your state senator to oppose, especially if your senator is shot. HB 86, we call the Guns Everywhere bill, also proposed by Jared Taylor from Nixa. This bill would allow gun in 17 places where they are not currently allowed. So this includes K through 12 public schools, public universities, bars, daycares, hospitals, churches, polling places, etc. There's a lot of opposition to this law, especially from state and private universities. The next step is the full House. It did pass out of committee, and I do have a digital petition for you to sign on this as well. Then HB 52, every town is actually silent about this law, but since I'm a resident of St. Louis County, this law would allow guns on public transportation. I don't want to ride the Metrolink with knowing that people are riding it with guns. This was proposed by somebody named Schnelting from St. Charles. It did pass the full House. It passed out of the Senate General Laws Committee, and it's headed for the full Senate. Voting for it, and these are just local representatives, Bruce DeGroot, Dottie Bailey, Derek Grier, Shamed Dogan, and actually Tracy McCreary also voted for that. I don't know why. Opposed was Trish Gunby. So here's another digital petition. We are asking you to sign this. You can either follow the link or again, use the QR code. And this is to vote no on the guns everywhere, as long as you are in agreement with that. So here's another law that just came up not too long ago, and many of you may have heard about this on the news. This is literally called the Minutemen Bell, and it was proposed by Senator White from Joplin. It was heard in the Senate General Laws Committee, but it has not been voted on yet. It creates a secret armed citizens militia to respond to state emergencies. The names and addresses of the Minutemen are registered with the Department of Public Safety, but they may not be disclosed. And if anybody discloses them, they can be charged with a felony. The Minutemen must possess their own firearms and accessories. However, all those items are considered the property of the state. The governor is the commander-in-chief. It requires 2/3 vote of the General Assembly to activate the Minutemen. The state is shielded from liability for any errors, any harm that comes to anybody. And if you're opposed to this, I suggest you write to the General Laws Chair, Bill Eigel, or if you're ambitious, the entire General Laws Committee. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something different, and that is something we really, really liked. I don't think this is going to go further this year, but it's good that at least it was heard in committee. This is HB 473. It is a domestic violence bill. It was proposed by a Republican representative from St. Charles, Ron Hicks. It's very similar to our federal domestic violence law. We do need a state DV law in Missouri because local and state law enforcement cannot enforce a federal law. So this bill removes access to guns for those who are convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence offenses. Examples of those would be spitting or slapping on a victim. It also removes access to guns for those issued a full order of protection. And it applies to perpetrators who are married, divorced, who have cohabitated with, had a child together, have stalked, or are a dating partner of the victim. This passed the House General Laws Committee unanimously on March 11th. And that's why, even though I don't think it's going to go any further, it is still hopeful. Okay, and then hot off the press, if I've got just a minute, this happened yesterday, and you probably heard about it on the news. We weren't paying any attention to this bill. It is HB 944. The original bill makes it legal to shoot predatory animals from a vehicle who are attacking farm animals on private property. However, yesterday, these amendments were included, guns in churches, guns on public transportation, and it lowers the concealed carry permitting age from 19 to 18. This was voted out of the full House on Monday, April 12th, and the usual suspects voted for it: Dottie Bailey, Bruce DeGroot, Derek Grier, and no votes were Trish Gunby and Shamed Dogan. So I suggest you watch this one, and if you are opposed to it, then contact your state senator. So our next meeting, Moms Demand Action, our next meeting is May 10th. You can register for it. I hope you will all come at momsdemandaction.org, and our public Facebook page is momsdemandaction.mo. I hope I haven't gone over my 10 minutes. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Mary. And I did see some questions in the chat, but we are going to reserve the questions for both our speakers at the end when our primary speaker here is finished. So I'd like to introduce Nancy Price, and she's going to talk about 2020 redistricting, fair and inclusive, and why it matters. Nancy Price is on the executive board of the League of Women's Voters Metro St. Louis. She chairs their Speakers Bureau and is actively involved with nearly all League of Women's Vote committees. Prior to retirement, Nancy earned a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees of science, majoring in plant physiology and biochemistry. This grew out of her lifelong love of nature and her curiosity about how things work. In addition to the League, she is also a member of the Kirkwood Library Board, the Webster Groves Nature Studies Society, the Sierra Club, Women's Voices Race for Social Justice, and the Interfaith Partnership. Fairness and inclusion are important to her, and redistricting should include both. Thank you, Nancy, you're on.
Let's see. So I'm going to talk to you today about redistricting and why it matters, because it only comes around infrequently, every 10 years. And sometimes we just kind of, you know, it goes by and we don't think about it. So there's a web link right here if you want more information about what the League is doing. But so the League of Women Voters has a program, a nationwide program called Making Democracy Work. And we've been working on this since before the census, because the census is really the lead into all this. If you don't do good census, then it just kind of is a problem all the way through. So the League is a nonpartisan political organization. So we don't do red party and blue party and green party, but we certainly have positions on issues. We've always been for people being able to vote, to have as few obstacles as possible, and to have their votes mean something to their legislature towards who are representing them. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. It sounds like you're all doing great. It also influences public policy through education and advocacy, which is why I'm here tonight. So the way this works is every 10 years, the US Census Bureau counts the total resident population. It includes everyone living in the country, regardless of age or status. And where you live and sleep is where you are said to reside. And it inventories the number of people in the country and how they are geographically distributed. Okay, let's see if I can get some of this stuff out of the way. All right, so the first part of it is reapportionment. Once we have the census counts, we know where people live and how many, then there has to be a reapportionment to accommodate shifts in population. As you know, the US House has 435 voting members, and that doesn't grow or shrink with the population, so they have to be reallocated or reapportioned. So in Missouri, after the 2010 census, Missouri actually lost one congressional representative. We used to have 9, now we've got 8. So it does, that's kind of what goes on. It doesn't even necessarily mean that your state has lost population. It means relative to others, you are not growing as quickly. So we don't have the official counts yet. They should be coming this month. But the expected reapportionment in Missouri is that we will continue to have 8 congressional districts. And across the country, this is the expectation right now. There are 9 congressional districts, and one of them is teeny tiny Rhode Island, that lost 1 representative each. And then Texas gained 3, Florida gained 2, and 4 others, the green ones, each gained 1. So it's the same number of representatives, they just are being reassigned. And that hasn't happened yet, but I think people have some pretty good ideas. So then after the reapportionment, there needs to be redistricting. So Obviously, 10 years ago, when we went from 9 congressional representatives to 8, you had to redraw the boundaries because you had to make sure that everybody had a representative. So those are the kinds of things that have to happen at this point. Each state also has to do their Senate and House districts. I shouldn't say each state because there's a handful of states that only have 1 congressional rep for the whole state, but most of the states do. And the point is that you want to have equal population in each district so that 1 person is 1 vote is the concept. So League of Women Voters campaign is called the People Powered Fair Maps. And their goal is to create fair and transparent, people-powered redistricting processes to eliminate both partisan and racial gerrymandering in all of the states, so that the voters actually are choosing their politicians and not the politicians drawing their districts so that, you know, they're kind of assured of being reelected or whatever. So we want it to come from the voters and the people living in the district. So this is for the congressional districts, and this is going to happen first because we get the census numbers for the state totals before we will get the detail to do the individual Senate and House districts. So this is going to begin probably another couple months. But the process is that the federal law has 2 requirements for how congressional districts are drawn, and all the states have to follow them. So with Missouri as well, within a state, there must be equal population in each state district. One can't have 100 and the other have 200 because then your share of your representative would not be the same. So also there's Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which was amended, which prohibits states or political subdivisions from imposing any voting qualification, practice, or procedure that results in the denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race, color, or language minority. And under the VRA, states cannot draw district maps that have the effect of reducing or diluting minority voting strength. And this is really important because if you had to prove that was someone's intent in drawing the maps, it would be much, much harder to have them ruled gerrymandered. But it just has to have the effect whether it was intended or not. So, as I said, the United States Constitution, Section 2 says the representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their numbers. So the congressional representatives, as 435, are going to be divided up. And this is the way it was actually written, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. So it's one of those always been kind of discriminatory. And then, of course, there's the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which really worked on voting practices or procedures that discriminate. That was, you know, how many beans in the jar, or, you know, all those absolutely impossible ways of eliminating a person from voting. And it also says that race must not be the predominant factor in drawing a district. But it says at the same time that the VRA may require the creation of a majority minority district. And in fact, many people say that District 1, which is St. Louis, is a majority minority district. And that's because you don't want to make it so a minority cannot effectively be a majority and have their voice heard. So we've got this balancing act on race. You know, you need to think about race, but you can't think too much about it. And it's kind of a difficult situation. And many of these have been gone to court. Some of them gone all the way up to the US Supreme Court. Now, we also, of course, have to worry about the Missouri Constitution. And this was where Amendment 1 came in that made some changes, and then Amendment 3 came in. Amendment 1 was also known as Clean Missouri. And Amendment 3 from last November undid most of that. So right now we have to work with what was voted on last November. So all the districts must be as nearly equal in population as they can be, and that's supported by what the feds say. And they also need to meet all the requirements of the US Constitution, federal laws, including the VRA. They need to be contiguous and compact to the extent possible by natural or political boundaries. That could be counties. Natural boundaries could be, like in Missouri, a river. We've got quite a few. Preserve communities and follow political subdivision lines. And also, they would have to have partisan fairness and competitiveness. But unfortunately, under Amendment 3, those are the lowest priority. So you start with being equal, you hit that as best you can, then you try and fit the next one under, the next one under. And so partisan fairness and competitiveness is low man on the totem pole. As far as compactness, there's not really a good definition, but there are some traditional lines, political boundaries. There's also some mathematical tests. There's also just looking at it to see if it looks kind of weird and there's no reason. And also, but what they're trying to get to is closely united territory, because people that have the same needs should be clumped together, because then they have more of a chance of getting their legislature to do what they want. So I'm assuming this group's really familiar with this. You have randomly 40 blue dots and 40 red dots, and you want to make 4 districts out of them of 20 people each. Well, if you do it where you have the 4 districts as shown on the left, you will end up with 3 majority Democrat and 1 majority Republican. If you do it on the right, you come out with just the opposite. So we know that it's really possible to change the outcome, because the one on the left would have, say, 3 representatives that were blue and 1 that was red. And so it's a concern how these lines are drawn. There are several kinds of gerrymandering. One is cracking. You spread the voters among many districts. So even though they all get a vote, they aren't determinant of the outcome in any district. You can also do packing, which means like you squish them all into a very limited one or a few districts where they do get to be in charge, but the rest, the majority of the districts are left to be run by whichever side is doing the packing. Tacking is you can kind of grab a distant area with specific demographics. And this usually looks kind of funny on a map, but it doesn't mean it's funny just because it looks a little odd. Sometimes there are reasons why things are not nice, neat little squares. Hijacking, you can redraw 2 districts so that 2 incumbents are actually in the same district and they have to run against each other. So obviously one of them's going to be defeated, maybe both of them. And then kidnapping, which where you can put significant support in the neighboring district. You can move people that think a certain way out of someone's district, and it may change the outcome. And then there's something that some people call a natural partisan gerrymander. And I think it's important in Missouri because it's really the way people live here. Each political party's voters tend to cluster in different districts. And the Democrats primarily are in the cities, and the Republicans tend to be more in the rural. So if you want to integrate those two groups, it's really hard to do it geographically. So there's some of that just goes on because of where people live. And absolutely both parties do it. We always call it gerrymandering because of what happened in Massachusetts, but gerrymandering's been going on since the Revolutionary War. It just has. When they first tried to get their constitution together, it was going on. So it's usually, of course, done more by whoever has the power because they have more ability to do it. But it's not a benefit to the voters. So as far as redistricting, what's going on with the courts, if something is considered gerrymandering or not. Racial gerrymandering, as I said, it only has to have the effect. So there have been quite a few court decisions which have upheld that an area has been racially gerrymandered. That has been fairly successful, but you know, it takes a process. And if you have to go to the Supreme Court, it's going to take a while. Partisan gerrymandering is much harder because when the laws were set up on redistricting, the power to do that was given to the legislature. So the court has said, the Supreme Court has said, you know, the original intent was that there would be some partisanship because they put it in the hands of the legislature, and that's a partisan place. However, at some point, it is too politically gerrymandered. But that is not a court decision, that is a political decision. And most recently, they have said that's not in their bailiwick. And then there's something that everyone might not know about, but it's called prison gerrymandering. An example of that would be that, and I'm just making broad generalizations here, but you know, an area, say like St. Louis City, which has a high concentration of Black population, and if people there go to prison for a felony, then they're actually incarcerated for a felony, they're probably going to be sent to a white rural area where we keep our bigger prisons. So what the effect of that is, when the census is done, they're counted, prison population is counted where they're incarcerated. So they will be clocked in as residents of these rural towns. Well, what that means is that you've taken population out of, say, St. Louis, and you have added population to, you know, when you put 1,000, 2,000 people into some of these small towns, you've really jacked up their head count, and nobody that's been imported is voting. So that means that their votes are worth a lot more because they live in a small town with a big prison. There are lots of kinds of redistricting software that we didn't used to have. And what that means is that it's easier to try things, to tweak things, to compare things. And so it's just a lot easier to look at options than it was. So that's something that's good. Now, who chooses the districts? Because that's what kind of, you know, if they're going to be unfair, who's the person in charge? Where do we need to put the pressure? So one on the left shows congressional districts, And the gray ones are places where there's no response or no information. So when you just look at the red and the blue, it's pretty obviously most people are, most states are using their legislature. When it comes to legislative districts on the right, which would be our Missouri House and Senate, Missouri has an independent commission. And not half, maybe a third do it that way. So here's who's on this year's Missouri House Redistricting Committee for the congressional districts. And the ones I put in red, I don't know if anybody here has them as representatives, but if you do, then you can throw your weight around if you write them and say, you know, I live in your, you know, you're my representative. And these people are basically going to be in charge of drawing the maps. Now, they haven't started yet because they don't have the data yet, but what they have been doing is they are called the Special Committee on House Redistricting, I think is their official title. And they have been meeting for several weeks since before they went on spring break. They meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30 in the morning, and they've been going congressional district. Each meeting is on one district, and they started with 8. So today was District 5. Thursday will be District 4, and then we'll be into 3, 2, and 1, which, you know, is going to affect probably most of the people listening. So go to the Missouri House Committee calendar, and you can see when their meetings are. You click on them. There's a thing that says live feed. You can watch it. You can also go to the page where their committee is, and it'll show you people on the committee. And that page has testimony that's been submitted, written testimony, which isn't read, but it's there and you can read it. And if you have thoughts about redistricting, these are the people to let them know. So that's what's going on now until they get some data. So they're just listening to the public. They're also listening to some politicians. And some of these have been fascinating because people just know a lot about some districts. And this is the little snaky thing that tells us what the process is. This year in particular has been a real problem because with COVID, it was very hard to get the census done. And of course, we wanted a complete count, and we wanted to do a really good job on hard to count people who became harder to count during COVID because even homeless shelters were sometimes closed down. So the data came in late or is coming, well, it's being processed and turned over later than planned. But what's going to happen is pretty soon we are going to get the apportionment for the state. So that's going to say you're going to have 8 districts. And then you're going to be, Missouri's General Assembly begins the process of drafting the congressional districts. And if they fail to ratify a plan, or if the governor vetoes the plan, they can make a second attempt. But if no plan is ratified or there are lawsuits, the courts become involved. And so when people say, well, we don't want a nonpartisan group because we want our elected people. Well, once it goes to the court, those aren't your elected people. So the version will be signed by the governor, or the courts will issue a ruling, and that'll be what they do. It's running on a really tight timetable because in February, the candidates have to file for those congressional seats. And the elections will be held in November of next year, and the new representatives will be seated in January of 2023. So that's the little sneaky process that gets you there. So we have 34 seats in the Senate, 163 seats in the House, and each of the top two parties from the last gubernatorial election gets to participate. So in this case, it's Republicans and Democrats. And each party's congressional district committee, District 1, 2, 3, submits 2 nominees for each congressional district. And then the governor selects 1 nominee from each district. And so there are going to be 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And then each party's state committee submits 5 names, and the governor picks 2 from those 5. So that's 4 more, gives you a total of 20. And this will be called the Senate Independent Bipartisan Citizens Commission, or the House Commission. So this is one of the more important things. At the first meeting, each commission has to establish at least 3 public hearing dates. So we really want to know when those are so we can follow. And each final map has to be approved by 14 of the 20. And if either or both commissions fail, the Senate and or the House, to submit a final plan, the Missouri Supreme Court will appoint 6 appellate court judges. So we get back to the judges. And here's a similar little snaky diagram. And they file their plans with the Secretary of State. Then there's what we call the communities of interest. And they are groups of people who share cultural or historic characteristics or economic interests, are contiguous on a map, and share, this is the key, a common bond linked to a set of public policy issues that would be affected by legislation. So they need to share something that they want legislators to do. And then if they're together, they presumably will have the ability or better ability to get that done. So when the voters who share a common bond in legislative issues are in one district, they can more effectively speak with one voice. So that's one of the things that some people are working on, is developing communities of interest. This would be a smaller number of people, but something like the Bridgeton landfill, which has sort of nothing to do with school districts or counties or anything. It's just people living there have this common issue. So here's what you can do. For congressional redistricting hearings, you can insist, and you write the committee people, you write your House person to insist that redistricting processes be fair and transparent. You can testify at the committee hearings that are going on right now. You can do it in person if you want to go down to Jeff City. A lot of people say that if you're not vaccinated, nobody's wearing a mask. So that's a consideration. Or you can testify remotely by turning in written testimony, which won't be read, but it's available online, and each of the Congress people will get it. You can mention specific concerns about a district, because we want these people to know what our concerns are and to take them into consideration. You can watch the hearings either live, or they do put them up on video later. And you can also read the submitted testimony from other people. What can you do for the Missouri House and Senate redistricting? Well, again, insist on redistricting processes being fair and transparent. These are also not politicians. Now, they are nominated by either the Democrat or the Republican group, but they are not sitting politicians. So you can think of who would be good for the commission, somebody who understands the area, understands what the issues are, things like that, and encourage them to volunteer to be, to go to whatever nominating group they, their district, and volunteer. You can attend those at least 3 scheduled public hearings. You can come up with communities of interest, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And you can, of course, educate others about how this is really important for racial and partisan fairness. And we're going to have to live with these districts for 10 years. That's the bottom line. There is something, there are many programs, but there is a program called Districtor with no E. And it can be used by individuals. It's free, it's online, to draw various versions of possible communities of interest. You can layer in school districts, you can layer in counties, you can layer in, you can see where the rivers are. And there is free training online Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And this is the link you might want to copy down if you're interested. So I'm going to move on, but I can share that later. And then there are some federal legislative fixes which are going on. We're working very hard to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which will help reverse the Shelby court decision, which removed supervision of places that have historically had some racial issues. And we're working very hard on that. But as you know, government only works if we participate. And the League of Women Voters US position is we want to promote fair and effective representation, maximize transparency, as well as the opportunity for public input. We want to reject protection of incumbents where the legislator picks the voters as opposed to the other way around. And we want to avoid preferential treatment for political parties or any racial gerrymandering. So with that, I'm going to ask for questions. I'm going to turn this down and see what anybody has to say. Oh my goodness, there's like 10 in the chat.
Yes, and I'd like to remind everyone that you can ask Mary Gross questions and of course Nancy both, because they're both here. If someone has posted a question, I am not seeing, oh, one is, can we share these slides after the meeting? And I hope that we can, Brian. If you can get those out to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get them to Nancy, we'll do that.
Sure. Just make sure that I have your email, wherever you want me to send them.
You can send them to me and I'll get them to Brian, since
Okay.
you've already got my email address.
Okay.
Something that has come through the chat is that the committee is so extremely unbalanced. I think there's 11 positions and Democrats only have 3. How did that happen? And if there's anything we can do about it?
I don't think there's anything that can be done about it at this point. Because I think it's just, it is, they've already started. How does it happen? Well, part of the reason it happens is because we have a supermajority of Republicans. So that's the way pretty much all the committees are, and it's very discouraging. I guess the other part of that is that the congressional districts, because there's only 8, it's not as much potential for problems as when you get into the House and the Senate, and those will be balanced.
What is your personal opinion, if you can express one, on the situation?
On the unbalanced
Mhm.
committee, oh, I think that whenever you have an unbalanced committee, there tends to be unequal opportunity for voices to be heard. And I think it's not just this committee. When you
Okay.
go to the elections committee, you see kind of the same thing.
Does some of you have some questions? Because right now I think we're sort of all stunned and a little depressed as we saw the. If you can feed me some more questions, or I don't have the raised hand, so I can't see you if you're raising your hand. We'd love to take more questions. There was a question to Mary, I think, as to what happened with Tracy McCreary on that vote. Do you have any insight?
Oh, I don't. She voted actually for the standalone bill, the HB 52, guns on public transportation. And then yesterday she voted for the amendment that provided for guns on public transportation. I do not know why. Crystal Quaid also voted for it. That's kind of a surprise.
Guess I'd like to understand why.
I can find out. And then somebody did ask if any of those bills dealt with guns on college campuses and universities, and Joanne Hagloff did answer it, and the answer is yes. The Guns Everywhere HB 86 would allow guns on public universities and college campuses, but of course the private colleges don't want that to happen either, because it would be coming their way.
Mary, just to follow up on that, is there a way for a college to post that they don't want guns on campus, or have a board policy against it? They're not allowed to do that then?
I don't know.
Okay. I think there was some stipulation that I know the business owners will have to have a sign posted, and the sign is going to be very obnoxiously large or something, possibly. Joanne?
Yeah, Joanne.
I think with respect to public colleges, they are not allowed to totally restrict guns under this bill. It's up to them to make some reasonable decisions about where guns can be allowed and where they can't be, and how they would have to be stored. And, it puts a lot of liability on them to make the right choices. But because they are a state entity and not a private entity, they can't just opt out with signs.
Okay.
Private businesses, I mean, these things haven't been enacted yet, but under HB 86, a private business could post signs that they do not allow guns. And they have to be specific size with specific size letters. And I'm thinking possibly that churches would be able to as well, because they are private. But anything that is a state entity does not have that opportunity.
I mean, we see that in hospitals all the time. You walk, there's no guns allowed. And so if they put up a sign and somebody sues to have guns, what's going to happen?
I can tell you what happened in Kirkwood after the shooting. There were no guns allowed in City Hall. I guess maybe the police officers, but and that policy had to be stopped because changes in the state law. That's pretty scary for people that were there that night.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm thinking that is government rather than business. So very interesting.
Yeah, under HB 86, guns would be allowed in governmental meetings and at polling places. It's a terrible bill, so that's why we're urging everybody to sign the petition and get in contact with your legislators about it.
Is this the one, or is it the other one that is in conflict with federal legislation? I think you know the bills better than I do, of course. There's something in conflict.
The nullification one, HB 85 and 310. They're trying to nullify all federal gun laws in the state. So like I said, background check laws would be in question. I think silencers are regulated by federal law. Gun trafficking is regulated by federal law. It is unconstitutional, but if it passes, it would be law in this state until it is successfully challenged. Several other states have passed this law, and Joanne, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's been challenged anywhere successfully.
No, it hasn't been challenged through the appellate courts. It was used as a defense in a trial case in Kansas, and that defense did not work, and the people were convicted of the felony of trafficking illegal guns. But the constitutionality of the laws, and they have been passed in 9 other states, the constitutionality of these nullification laws has not been litigated up to the Supreme Court.
Okay. I see some questions for Nancy here. That's great concern for us, of course, because we're in Congressional District 2 and 3 that could be altered. Do you have those concerns as well?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yes. What I think, I looked at what parts of the state are growing. And of course, we all know that St. Louis City is losing population. It can't grow east, so it will have to grow west. And it looks like the effort to keep St. Charles County, which is kind of north of the city, as a, put the whole county somewhere, which is generally what people try and do. So it's going to take parts out of District 2, and already St. Louis County's parts of it are in 3 different districts. So it's just kind of, it's a little bit of a mess.
It sounds like it.
And, I kind of think out of everywhere in the state at the congressional level, it's the most likely to have been carefully drawn.
Okay. We've got a question from Audrey for Mary. There is a rumor the man proposing the gun nullification, Taylor, is pushing it with Republican help only to get his name out there and carry the item all the way to the Supreme Court so that he'll get national recognition and promote his political career. Do you have a comment on that?
I don't have any knowledge of that, but I wouldn't doubt it, because he and Senator Burleson have been collaborating, I guess it's not really a good word, with the Missouri Firearms Coalition for several years to get this bill passed. So Jared Taylor proposes it every year, and Burleson is his crony, and they do try to push it through every year. I don't know what their motivation is. I can only speculate on that. I'm not going to offer an opinion.
Okay.
It does seem sad that people would do it just for publicity. I mean, I don't know this man, but it just seems really sad, because there should be some positive message he could be putting out there that would draw people to him.
I need to see if somebody Brian, can you see if someone has their hand up? Because I got to figure out how to see chat and hand up at the same time.
No one has their hand up right now. There are other questions. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see.
Oh, I see another one here, but go ahead, Brian.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I don't know if we're seeing the same one. I do see, would the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act be nullified in Missouri?
I do not know. I'm not familiar with that act. Are you, Joanne?
Well, I think the wording of the nullification bill is any federal law that would restrict a person's Second Amendment rights. So if this is a bill that actually, I'm not familiar with that federal law either, but I mean, that's how it's written, to protect Second Amendment rights. So if that bill protects Second Amendment rights, you know, it would be valid in Missouri.
Okay. I'm getting a comment from Janet Kester that the Missouri Firearms Coalition people are also anti-mask and anti-vax. Can highly recommend the NPR podcast, No Compromise, as it's highly relevant and to Missouri and informative. So thank you for that. I'm going to write a note to listen to that.
Mhm.
Brian, do you see some questions
Did
there?
you, I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you get Al Gerber's in? We here are most concerned with Congressional District 2. How do you think the political balance will change there?
You're asking me. Well, and I noticed somebody was worried about 3, and I was going to say Congressional District 3. I haven't been in Missouri that long, but Congressional District 3 was, I'm sorry, it was split into 3 districts. Was it Jefferson County? I can't remember what somebody asked, but that was when Missouri went from 9 districts to 8 districts, and a lot of those changes were around St. Louis, because they used to have 2 reps, and a lot of, people were shifted all over the state, but the big decrease in population happened to be going on in St. Louis. So that's where they thought it was best to trim a good deal of the 9th congressional district that was disappearing. I don't know. I think that, okay, some people would say parts of St. Louis County are being sort of tossed into Congressional District 1 because they're not valued. Throw them in with the city, with the Black folks. I'm just saying what some people say. Other people say, Ann Wagner doesn't do a thing for me. I'd rather be in Cori Bush's. So, you know, of course, Cori Bush wasn't there at the time, but I don't know. I just don't know. But I think that there was a very close race for Ann Wagner's seat, which is Congressional District 2, which will be affected by things being redrawn. So the potential is, if it's a close seat and your party wants to keep it, you're very careful about how those lines are drawn.
Can I comment on that?
Go ahead, Dennis. Well, then Norm Eisenberg will be next.
Yeah, just to comment that I think I would agree that being a race that is closely washed in the 2nd Congressional District, and with the GOP dominance of the Congressional District Commission of the legislature, with 8-3, you can bet that the GOP will be carefully watching that GOP district for District 2 to make it probably more Republican. And certainly if they move some of the Democrats into District 1 because of the city, then that will be one way. And they can either try to pull from Franklin County, Jefferson County, St. Charles, those are all more Republican areas, to make it a more Republican and safe district. Some of that could be dictated by some of the politics that are going on, that Ann Wagner, if she's running for re-election, she'll probably have a say in terms of what she wants. But if she's running for the U.S. Senate, you'll see some juxing for a position on the part of Republicans who might want to run for that seat, who may want to have that seat or that district drawn to favor them for the race that they would then be running. So just some observations or some comments.
Those are good.
Yeah, and those things are kind of what we don't necessarily see, but they definitely go on.
Norm, Maureen, I'm going to call Norm Eisenberg. He had his hand up
Yes.
next, and Erica Brooks. Yeah.
I can
Go ahead,
even,
Norm. You're unmuted.
I can even display my my face.
There you
But
go.
I inadvertently sent the question. It's written out if Nancy wants to look at it. I said it to her and not to anybody else. So, but I'm interested in what happened after Amendment 3 got passed. It not only threw out all of the wonderful changes that we'd put into Clean Missouri, but how do the procedures that are now in place for redistricting the state legislature differ from the procedures that were in place after the 2010 census? Because at that time, the result was that we have both a House and Senate that are more than 2/3 Republican, but that exceeds the usual way that the parties break out on statewide elections. Granted, Republicans have been winning a lot more lately, but it's not a 2/3 vote usually, and sometimes Democrats even win. So what has changed after Amendment 3 that would make it perhaps worse than it was in 2010 and 2011?
I'm not sure. I guess I should know more about 2010, which I didn't. Part of, well, I think part of it is just attitudes that we see nationwide. I have been listening to some of the hearings on the people talking about different districts, and a lot of them are people that live in those districts. And they started with 8 and now they're down to 5. So they have been, a lot of them have been rural districts. And what I hear is, we're rural people. We don't want urban people. We don't want, I guess the kindest word is progressives in our district, because we want to be with people who think like us. And I just hear, and I hear things like, I just find this kind of different, but I guess people that have always voted at a certain place, if they get into a different congressional district, they might have to vote in a different location, or neighbors might not vote in the same place. And somehow that seems to be a big deal. And personally, I've lived in 10 states, and I pretty much figure whatever I have to do to drive, I will do, because I just believe in it. And I've lived in some pretty small towns, and you had to drive. And now I live in St. Louis County, and we can now vote at any polling place.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that part of it is this rural-urban divide, and I guess it's probably been there a long time, but I think it's been inflamed.
But that doesn't address the fact that the Republicans don't have all that many more people who vote Republican on statewide elections to justify the fact that they got 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. And I wonder if they are in position to do even bigger damage to us Democrats after this next redistricting. I doubt that they're going to do any better for us.
Well, I think that the areas around, I think 1, 2, and 3 are going to be the real places which could go. I think the rest of them are going to turn out pretty much the way they are.
I'm speaking of the state representative and state Senate district.
Yeah,
which were the ones that were affected most by Amendment 3.
Mm-hmm.
So
well,
I wonder how that's going to change. Are we going to be forced to live with a 2/3 Republican General Assembly for the next 10 years?
I don't have a crystal ball, and to tell you the truth, I really don't know many people from rural Missouri. I think probably there are people in this group that understand those things better, because a lot of people that live in St. Louis County have relatives that live in the rural parts. I don't have anybody that I Facebook with. But yeah, I think it's still going to be, that's why we need to be watching. That's all I can say, is because we have on the statewide elections, it's maybe 40-60, but in terms of what you're talking about in the actual districts for Senate and House, it's not even close to 40%. Some of it can be to the fact that people are clustered. You know, we don't have a lot of Black people anywhere except for a few places in this state. And so those issues don't get dealt with very much.
I see that Erica has a question. I'd have to scroll up, but Erica, you've got your hand raised. Are you going to ask the question that you put in the chat?
Yes, I am.
Good. Great.
And Nancy, she pretty much touched on a few things that I'm going to ask about, and it's dealing with the lack of representation, like everybody's been saying, as far as the redistricting committee. And, you know, with the Better Together STL structure, it was structured to reduce the representation and political voice of African-American people in the first place. So when it comes to this redistricting committee and the lack of power or positions for African-American people, I mean, I just really want to know. I know you all had this petition or whatever, you're asking people to sign for different bills or whatever, but what can really be done in a timely manner to have the representation, it's, you know, to keep the voice and keep us from being redistricted to the point where we're invisible as African-American communities. And what are the deadlines for these different bills that need to be petitioned?
Well, one of the things that I heard today, Emmanuel Cleaver was not in the meeting. He's not on the committee, but he wasn't there to give testimony because he had a conflict. But someone else came and talked about the demographics of sort of the Kansas City area. And some of the things they said kind of impressed me, if I can find what I wrote.
I'm sorry, but I'm from St. Louis County. So, I mean, I would rather know about that information than Kansas City, because I won't be able to even refer to
well, I would suggest that you put your thoughts down and submit them as written testimony to the committee. If you're in District 1,
yes.
Let's see, I believe it's the 27th. It's a Tuesday morning at 8:30 that they are going to discuss that particular congressional district. Now, they aren't making decisions yet because they don't have the data. It should be coming in April. The other thing you can do is certainly write your House person, whoever is your House representative. But I don't know that there's tons that we can do except keep sticking our nose in and saying, you know, maybe this could be done differently. You know, I don't think most people get that involved in redistricting. And so then it's done, and then we go, well, this isn't right.
So if there's a petition, how many people do you need to be heard on a petition? And it's one thing to have one.
I don't know about a petition. You can just write testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And just say, you know, I live in this district, and I feel that it's important that this group not be divided, or this group be kept together, or if this current district is going to be expanded, that it be expanded to bring in this group who are more similar, have shared issues.
Okay, and my last question.
No, I'm
when
willing to listen, you know, to all your questions.
Okay, so where can I go to see what the potential redistricting zones will be in District 1 so that I can be able to contest it, you know, to say,
Yeah.
hey, this works and this doesn't? Where can I go to find those different?
Well, there isn't one yet. Let's see. It looks like they'll be getting their data for the congressional, or are you talking about like the Senate and the House? For the congressional, it'll be like in July, I think, when they'll start drawing up maps.
Okay.
And
If-
Will
it
they
looks
be online?
I don't know. I think we should push our way in and say we want them to be available to the public. They should be available to the public. They're supposed to be. But sometimes they just go by real quickly and we didn't know.
If I may, Dennis Lavley here again. Under that federal law, they cannot be dividing up minority communities. So the probability is good that the first congressional district will still have a heavy concentration of minorities, African Americans or whatever, simply because they cannot, they could be in potential violation of federal law. So that's where at least the prevailing political knowledge, and I wouldn't say it's hard and fast, it's that we will probably always have a district in the eastern, the St. Louis area that will be heavily minority, and we will probably have a district in the greater Kansas City area that will probably be more or have a better opportunity for minority participation, simply by virtue of the number of minorities that live in those respective areas.
Well, what they were saying today about Kansas City is that it's, and I can't find my numbers right now, but he was saying that it really is interesting because it's a majority white district that has a Black representative. And of course, we only have 2 in the state, and the one from St. Louis, Corey Bush, that is what's called a majority minority. A majority of the people are a minority because those words get confusing. So, but that Kansas City is not currently a majority minority area. And I don't, like I say, I don't know all this stuff because I haven't grown up here or lived here enough. But they also have a fair number of Latin Americans too, which I don't think not a substantial amount in St. Louis.
I've noticed that Audrey Schulke has some maps that she wanted to share.
Sure.
And I think that she's got them up. I saw them recently. Audrey, are you there? Audrey?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go get them again. Just a minute.
Okay.
I forgot how I did it.
Oh no, they looked really good a few minutes ago.
Did you just do share screen?
Yes, I did.
There you go.
Okay, this was in 2010. And oops, go backwards. I'm sorry. This was in 2020 or 2000 before they changed them, and then 2010. So this was the old ones. St. Louis was one by itself. You can see.
Well, we can't see it. We see that you're choosing it, but we don't see it open.
You have to click on it to make it open.
It says stop share.
No, you don't want to stop share.
You have 2 screens, Audrey. Are you working on dual screens?
No, I do not have 2 screens, but I'm looking at the map myself, and it says I'm sharing, and I don't know why you're in it.
Okay, well, maybe close this screen with the list, and the picture will come back.
Okay, hold on. I did it before. Come on.
Yeah, we saw maps.
Yeah, I didn't know who they were, but they look good.
Oh, son of a gun.
Yeah, when you click share screen, you might, if you have multiple windows open, you can choose the different windows. Anyway,
I'm gonna try again.
Sure.
yeah, just the green button in the bottom, then you should see multiple windows that you can choose from.
Okay, there's my, can you see that map?
No,
What do you see? Because I'm
Just
on
the-
the map.
List,
See
the
the
list.
list.
yeah.
Can you go to up in the top right hand where there's like a little, can you shrink, do the dash instead of the
Good
square?
idea. Minimize it.
Minimize what, you guys?
Upper right hand corner, can you minimize this page?
What you're showing is the file list that you have. You need to
Yeah.
minimize your file list so that your map then would be the dominant screen.
Okay.
Yeah, only do that one.
Ta-da.
Yeah, click that.
Oh, I'm seeing a map. You're not seeing the map?
No.
No.
Oh, God, dog.
Click that one there.
All right, hold on. No map yet, huh?
Nope.
That's what I'm looking at.
Well, that's really frustrating.
Audrey, yeah, let me take over real quick. Let me see if you don't mind. Let me have remote control for you. Let's see if that works. No, you'd have to authorize it. Well, we won't worry about it too much.
Well, shoot, those would have been good. Maybe you can get them in.
Actually, I spent a lot of time looking at districting. I was just myself curious about where is this gerrymandering happening? And so I spent a long time looking at the House districts, the state Senate districts, and the congressional districts. I made a whole big chart. It's like 40 pages of maps and stuff. And you can see, I was just curious, well, did they really make a gain or is that just talk? And yeah, they made gains and you can pretty much see, some of them were, it was really interesting. But the two maps I was trying to show you are just the really simple, basic, here's what it was, here's what it is. And the most obvious thing is Jeff Coe got cut into 3 districts, but there's other stuff in there that's a little shady. And like Mary said, they both do it. Like Nancy said, they both do it. Both parties do it. But it was just interesting. They had gone from drawing the districts in a north-south direction to an east-west direction to encompass more voters. It was interesting. So let me try.
Go ahead.
Try to share this again.
I think it's because District 9 was kind of north and south sort of above St. Louis.
Hey, that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I think the trick is I can't talk.
Yeah. No.
Okay, so this was the old one. There's St. Louis was its own district.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
And see where 9 is, which is the eastern part. That 9, see, then when we lost a district.
Then it became this.
Right.
That's when we lost
this
Carnahan.
big swath across the top.
That's when we lost Carnahan, right?
Yeah.
Right. So 7 is pretty much the same. It's a little taller. 8 is pretty much the same. It's not 8 anymore, but well, I guess it is. It's 8 down here. 6 is a lot bigger.
I would like, can you look at 2? Because
This is 2.
that's Ann Wagner's district. And like I say, at a national level, that was one that people were watching because it was very competitive.
Mhm.
And if I was a Republican, if I am a Republican, I would be wanting to keep it.
It was a lot bigger.
Because I think some of the east part of it, District 2 went to District 1 because 1 really can't grow. That little piece above it is a different county.
Interesting.
So Audrey, where did you find those maps at? Where can I go to find those maps?
Yeah, you know what? The Missouri Secretary of State has this is where I got these. He has, if you go to MOSOS, Interactive District Maps, you can just type that in and they have a map. You can look at what was and what is, and you put in, you can break it up by House district, by Senate district, by congressional district, but it's on the Missouri Secretary of State's website.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Great.
welcome.
Well, good, lots of information this evening and a lot of camaraderie between a lot of people getting all our questions answered and participating. So we're pretty much going to need to wrap this up because we're at the 8:30 time, but I want to thank our guests and I want to thank all of us for all coming together and making this a really good meeting. So we will see you next month. Thank you, everybody.
for having me. I wish I had more great solutions, but I haven't got them.
There's not too many meetings that we can say we've got great solutions.
Well, you just have to keep making your voice heard. I say it's Chinese water torture.
Yes.
You know, eventually they're going to say, get this person off my back.
Well, again, thanks, everybody.
All right, spread the word. Second Tuesday of the month. We'll see you next month. Second
Thank
Tuesday.
you.
Thank you for
All right,
having me.